The morning coffee tasted bitter in Commander Roth's mouth as he watched the holographic news display flicker to life. Around him, the retirement home's common room buzzed with excitement. Former soldiers, engineers, and spacers all leaned forward. In their chairs, eyes bright with curiosity about humanity's first contact with alien civilizations. "Historic day, isn't it, Roth?" wheezed old Colonel Barnes, his cybernetic lung making soft clicking sounds. "Finally, we're not alone in the universe." Roth said nothing. He sipped his coffee and studied the images flowing across the display. 3 alien ambassadors stood before Earth's United Council, their forms strange and magnificent. The first was tall and scaled with golden eyes that moved slowly and deliberately. The news anchor called them saurians. The second ambassador was smaller, insect-like, with compound eyes that seemed to see everything at once. The hive, they called it. The third was barely visible, a shimmering form of pure energy that hurt to look at directly. The luminals. "They're beautiful," whispered Nurse Katie, the young woman who brought Roth his medications each morning. "So advanced. So peaceful. Peaceful." The word made Roth's jaw clench. He had spent 40 years in the Terran Defense Corps, fighting pirates in the asteroid belts, putting down colonial rebellions, and studying every piece of intercepted alien communication that filtered through military intelligence. He knew things. These people didn't. Things that would keep him awake tonight. The Saurian ambassador was speaking now, its voice deep and resonant through the translation device. It spoke of honor in battle, of glorious conquests across 17 star systems, of ancient traditions that guided their empire. The camera focused on its ceremonial armor, covered in what looked like battle scars. "Sounds like they know their way around a fight," Barnes commented approvingly. The hive representative buzzed and clicked, describing vast fleets of living ships that moved as one mind, battles won through superior numbers and coordination. Millions of warriors, all thinking as one, all moving with perfect unity. Then the luminal spoke, its words accompanied by flashes of light that seemed to bypass the ears entirely. It described weapons that could unmake matter itself, shields that turned energy into nothingness, technology that humans couldn't even begin to understand. The other residents murmured their amazement, but Roth felt ice forming in his stomach. He had read classified reports about these species. The Saurians fought like medieval knights, all honor and formation fighting. The hive moved like a single organism, predictable once you understood their patterns. The luminals relied so heavily on their technology that they had forgotten how to think creatively. None of them understood what humans really were. "They're offering us membership in their Galactic Confederation," the news anchor was saying. "A chance to join thousands of species in peaceful cooperation across the galaxy." Roth almost laughed. Peaceful cooperation. He remembered the Titan uprising when human colonists had held off corporate security forces for 8 months using nothing but mining equipment and desperate courage. He remembered the Battle of Europa Station, where Captain Torres had turned a cargo hauler into a weapon that took out 3 destroyers. He remembered 100 small wars that these aliens had never heard of, conflicts where humans had learned to fight dirty, to improvise, to survive against impossible odds. The human ambassador was responding now, speaking of Earth's desire for peace, for learning, for cultural exchange. Roth recognized the diplomat's carefully chosen words, the kind of language that bought time while intelligence services worked overtime to understand the threat. "Look at them," Barnes was saying, pointing at the aliens. "So dignified, so civilized. Maybe we can finally put our wars behind us." Roth set down his coffee cup. Around the room, other veterans nodded in agreement. They saw hope in the aliens' advanced technology, their talk of peaceful cooperation. They didn't see what Roth saw. The saurians stood in perfect formation, never moving independently. The hive ambassador's every gesture was mirrored by its attendants, all moving in unison. The luminal barely seemed to register the presence of individual humans, as if dealing with lesser beings was beneath its notice. These species had never fought a war like humans fought wars. They had never faced an enemy that would use civilians as soldiers, that would turn every piece of technology into a weapon, that would sacrifice everything for victory. They had never encountered a species forged by thousands of years of brutal conflict against its own kind. Roth pulled out his tablet and began typing. If what he suspected was true, someone needed to document what was about to happen. Someone needed to record how the galaxy learned to fear a species it had dismissed as primitive warmongers. The interview continued on screen. The alien ambassadors spoke of humanity's potential role in the Confederation, labor forces for dangerous work, peacekeepers for minor disputes, cultural exchanges to broaden their primitive understanding of the universe. They spoke of humans, like pets. Useful pets, but pets nonetheless. Fascinating, murmured Dr. Kim, the home's chief physician. Imagine what we could learn from them. Their medicine alone could extend human life by centuries. Roth kept typing. He wrote about the Saurian Empire's 17 conquered worlds, all taken through traditional fleet battles against enemies who fought the same way they did. He wrote about the Hive's millions of warriors, perfectly coordinated but incapable of independent thought. He wrote about luminal technology that had made them so powerful they had forgotten what desperation felt like. "You're awfully quiet today, Roth," Barnes observed. "What do you think about all this?" Roth looked up from his tablet. Around him, dozens of former soldiers watched with hopeful eyes. They wanted to believe in a peaceful future, in a galaxy where humanity could set aside its weapons and join a civilized community of species. "I think," Roth said carefully, "that we're about to learn something very important about ourselves." The news program continued, but Roth wasn't watching anymore. He was thinking about Captain Torres and her impossible victories, about the miners of Titan who held out for 8 months against impossible odds, about every time in human history that someone had looked at an overwhelming enemy and found a way to win anyway. The aliens thought they knew what humans were. They would learn differently soon enough. Roth returned to his typing, documenting the last day of galactic peace. 6 months later, Commander Roth sat in the same chair, watching the same holographic display, but everything had changed. The cheerful optimism that had filled the retirement home during first contact was gone. In its place was a tense silence that reminded him of the hours before battle. The news was bad. Human colonists in the Outer Rim had refused to abandon their settlements when the Saurian Empire claimed the territory. Diplomatic talks had collapsed when humanity's representatives walked out rather than sign relocation orders. Now, according to the morning reports, the Saurians were sending a battle fleet to enforce their will. 200 ships, Colonel Barnes muttered, his cybernetic lung wheezing more than usual. 200? Against what? 30 converted cargo haulers? Roth had been reading the classified reports that his old contacts still shared with him. The truth was even worse than Barnes. New. The human defense fleet in the Outer Rim consisted of mining vessels, transport ships, and civilian craft hastily fitted with whatever weapons the colonists could manufacture. Their commander was a former asteroid belt patrol captain named Maya Torres, someone the Saurians probably considered beneath notice. "It's a massacre waiting to happen," Dr. Kim said quietly. She had been following the news obsessively since the diplomatic breakdown. "Those poor colonists don't stand a chance." The display switched to an interview with Admiral Thex, the Saurian fleet commander. He stood in perfect military posture, his golden scales gleaming under the studio lights. When the interviewer asked about casualties, he spoke with calm certainty. "The human mammals will have one opportunity to surrender with honor," he said through the translation device. "If they refuse, they will be removed from Saurian territory. We do not anticipate significant resistance." Roth almost smiled at that. Thex spoke like every other military commander who had never faced humans in battle. He expected his enemies to fight like saurians, with formation flying and honorable single combat. He expected them to surrender when faced with superior numbers and technology. The display showed images of the saurian fleet preparing to depart. Massive dreadnoughts bristling with energy weapons, escort cruisers in perfect formation, fighters arranged in geometric patterns that spoke of military discipline refined over centuries. It was an impressive sight, the kind of overwhelming force that had conquered 17 star systems. "They're trying to intimidate us," Barnes said bitterly. "Show off their fancy ships so we'll back down without a fight." Nurse Katie brought Roth his morning medications, her hands shaking slightly. "Do you think the colonists will evacuate? It's just empty space out there. Surely it's not worth dying for." Roth took his pills and considered the question. The outer rim settlements were indeed small, barely 5,000 people spread across a dozen asteroid habitats. But they represented something more important than their size suggested. They were humanity's first independent colonies, built without Earth's permission or support. The people living there had chosen freedom over safety, just like their ancestors who crossed oceans or trekked into wilderness. "They won't leave," he said simply. The display switched to footage from New Ceres, the largest of the Outer Rim settlements. Captain Torres stood before a crowd of miners, engineers, and their families. She looked tired but determined, her gray hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. When she spoke, her voice carried the flat certainty of someone who had already made the hard decisions. "We're not going anywhere," she told the crowd. "This is our home. We built it with our own hands, and we'll defend it the same way." The crowd cheered, but Roth could see the fear in their eyes. These were civilians, not soldiers. They had mining equipment and construction tools, not military weapons. Against 200 Saurian warships, they seemed hopeless. But Roth remembered Captain Torres from her service record. She had commanded patrol boats in the asteroid belt, hunting pirates and smugglers through the debris fields of the outer system. She understood three-dimensional combat better than any Saurian admiral who had learned to fight in the flat plane of planetary space. More importantly, she understood something the aliens never would. She knew how to cheat. The news switched to expert analysis, retired admirals and defense specialists explaining why the colonists should surrender. They talked about the Saurians' superior technology, their overwhelming numbers, their centuries of military experience. Everything they said was true and completely irrelevant. "Look at this," Barnes said, pointing at tactical displays showing Saurian battle formations. "Perfect discipline, perfect coordination. They move like they're on parade." That was exactly the problem, Roth thought. The Saurians fought like they were still on the parade ground, following ancient patterns that had worked against enemies, who followed the same rules. They expected their opponents to line up in neat formations and trade fire until someone's shields failed. They had never fought humans. The display showed Admiral Thex's fleet entering the Outer Rim system. 200 ships in perfect order, advancing on the human settlements like an unstoppable tide. The news commentators spoke in hushed tones about the impending battle, speculating about how quickly the colonists would surrender. Then something strange happened on the tactical display. The human ships weren't arranging themselves in defensive formations. Instead, they were scattering throughout the asteroid field, disappearing among the countless chunks of rock and ice that filled the system. Some seemed to shut down their engines entirely, drifting like debris. "What are they doing?" Dr. Kim whispered. "They're not even trying to fight." But Roth understood. Torres wasn't preparing to fight a Saurian-style battle with neat formations and honorable single combat. She was preparing to fight like a human, using every advantage the environment could provide. The asteroid field wasn't just terrain to maneuver through. It was a weapon. Admiral Thex apparently thought the same thing the news commentators did. His fleet continued its stately advance, expecting the scattered human ships to either surrender or die heroically in a futile gesture. He broadcast a final demand for surrender, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never experienced defeat. Captain Torres responded with a single word transmitted on all frequencies. No. What happened next lasted exactly 17 minutes and changed galactic history forever. Roth watched in grim satisfaction as Torres turned 3 asteroid mining platforms into kinetic weapons, using their industrial equipment to launch massive chunks of rock at relativistic speeds. The Saurian admiral had positioned his fleet in perfect formation, which made them perfect targets. 50 ships died in the first salvo. The survivors scattered in confusion as human fighters emerged from hiding spots throughout the asteroid field, attacking from angles the Saurians never expected. Torres had turned the entire system into an ambush, using every piece of mining equipment, every communications relay, every scrap of human ingenuity to create chaos. The battle ended with Admiral Thex retreating with less than half his fleet intact. He had learned the first rule of fighting humans. They didn't play by anyone else's rules. In the retirement home common room, stunned silence gave way to cheering. But Roth didn't cheer. He just made notes in his tablet, documenting the day the galaxy first glimpsed what humans could do when their backs were against the wall. The real war was just beginning. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation High Council convened 3 days after Admiral Thex's defeat, broadcast live across 1,000 star systems. Commander Roth watched from his usual chair, a cup of cold coffee forgotten in his hands as 3 civilizations struggled to comprehend what had just happened to their universe. General Drayak of the Saurian Empire stood at the center of the council chamber, his scarred scales reflecting the harsh lighting. He had conquered 17 star systems in 40 years of warfare, and his voice carried the authority of absolute certainty. Around him, representatives of the Confederation's member species listened in careful silence. The mammalian species has committed an act of unprovoked aggression, Drayak declared, his words transmitted through translation devices to every corner of known space. They have violated sacred territorial rights and destroyed military vessels with dishonorable tactics. This cannot be allowed to stand. The Hive Queen's primary speaker, a sleek insectoid creature with compound eyes that never blinked, buzzed in agreement. Its translated words came out mechanical and precise. The collective consciousness concurs. The human deviation from accepted combat protocols represents a threat to galactic stability. Unity of response is required. The luminal representative remained silent, its energy form flickering with patterns that hurt to look at directly. When it finally spoke, its words bypassed audio entirely, appearing as thoughts in the minds of listeners. Their primitive weapons should not have been capable of penetrating our allied shields. This suggests unknown technological adaptations that require immediate investigation and containment. In the retirement home common room, Colonel Barnes shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "They're talking about us like we're some kind of plague," he muttered. But Roth was focusing on something else. The alien representatives were scared. For the first time in their recorded history, the Galactic Confederation had suffered a military defeat at the hands of a species they considered primitives. Admiral Thex's fleet had been cut to pieces by converted mining equipment and improvised weapons. The implications terrified them. "They want to form a coalition," Dr. Kim observed, watching as the 3 species began coordinating their response. All of them together, against humanity. On screen, General Drayak was outlining his strategy. The Saurian Empire would contribute their heavy battle fleets and disciplined warriors. The Hive would provide numerical superiority, with millions of bioships grown specifically for this campaign. The Luminal Collective would supply advanced weapons and shield technology that could, in theory, counter human unpredictability with overwhelming technological advantage. "We will deploy 5,000 ships," Drayak announced with cold certainty. 50 million warriors. Every human settlement will face simultaneous assault, preventing their primitive tactics from succeeding through coordination. The campaign will be called the Pacification of Sul. The number sent a chill through the retirement home. 5,000 ships. Even at the height of human naval power, Earth had never fielded more than 300 warships simultaneously. The aliens were bringing enough force to sterilize every human world twice over. But Roth was more interested in humanity's response. His tablet displayed classified intelligence reports from his old contacts in military command. While the aliens debated and planned, humans were doing what they did best, adapting. Admiral Lisa Chen had been appointed Supreme Commander of Human Defense Forces, a position that had never existed before but was now necessary. Her first order had been the implementation of something called Total War Protocol, a doctrine that sent ice through Roth's veins even as he admired its brutal efficiency. Every human colony was being transformed into a fortress. Civilian manufacturing was being converted to military production. Most disturbing of all, the distinction between civilian and military personnel was being eliminated. Every human settlement, from the massive orbital habitats around Earth to the smallest mining outposts, was becoming part of the war machine. "Look at this," Barnes said, pointing to news footage from Luna City. "They're teaching children how to use weapons. Kids, Roth. What kind of people turn their children into soldiers? The kind of people who understand they're fighting for species survival," Roth thought but didn't say. He had read the intelligence reports. The Confederation wasn't planning to conquer humanity. They were planning to relocate them to reservation worlds where they could be controlled and monitored. It was a polite form of extinction. The display switched to footage from human colonies throughout the system. On Mars, atmospheric processors were being converted into chemical weapon factories. In the asteroid belt, mining equipment was being repurposed into mass drivers capable of launching projectiles at interplanetary distances. On Europa, the ice mining platforms were being transformed into kinetic weapon batteries. Most chilling of all were the reports from the outer colonies. Human settlements that had seemed helpless just weeks ago were now bristling with improvised defenses. Communication networks were being hardened against cyber attack. Supply chains were being decentralized so that the loss of any single facility wouldn't cripple the war effort. "They're turning their entire civilization into a weapon," Dr. Kim whispered, and Roth could hear the fear in her voice. On screen, the Galactic Council was finalizing their battle plans. General Dryak displayed tactical formations that had conquered civilizations across the galaxy. Saurian dreadnoughts would advance in perfect order, their shields overlapping to create impenetrable walls of protection. Hive bioships would swarm around the heavy units, providing screening and reconnaissance. Luminal energy weapons would deliver precise, overwhelming firepower at ranges beyond human response capability. It was a beautiful plan, refined through centuries of galactic warfare against enemies who fought the same way. The only problem was that humans didn't fight like galactic species. They fought like humans. The news shifted to an interview with a military analyst who had studied the Battle of New Ceres. The expert explained how Captain Torres had won through irregular tactics and exploitation of environmental factors, carefully avoiding language that might seem too approving of human methods. "The key thing to understand," the analyst said, "is that this was an anomaly. The Saurian fleet was caught off guard by unconventional tactics. That won't happen again. The coalition will be prepared for anything the humans can throw at them." Roth almost laughed at the naive confidence in the analyst's voice. Prepared for anything humans could throw at them? The coalition was preparing to fight the war they understood, against an enemy that would follow the same rules they did. They had no idea what was coming. His tablet chimed with another classified report. Human military doctrine was being rewritten in real time. The old concepts of military and civilian targets were being abandoned. Instead, humans were adopting what Admiral Chen called total warfare. Every resource, every person, every piece of technology would be part of the war effort. More importantly, humans were studying captured alien technology with the desperate intensity of a species facing extinction. The wreckage of Admiral Thex's fleet was being analyzed by human scientists who didn't care about patents or protocols or the gradual development of understanding. They just needed weapons that could keep their children alive. The broadcast ended with General Drayak's final declaration. The human species will submit to relocation and integration into proper galactic society. Their primitive aggression will be channeled into useful labor. The Coalition fleet will depart within the month. As the display faded to news commentary, Roth closed his tablet and considered what he had witnessed. The three most powerful military forces in known space were mobilizing to destroy humanity. They brought superior numbers, better technology, and centuries of military experience. They also brought the arrogant certainty of species that had never faced an enemy willing to do absolutely anything to survive. Roth began typing his daily observations, documenting the last month of galactic peace. Soon, the universe would learn what humans had always known, that wars weren't won by the strongest or the smartest, but by whoever was willing to pay the highest price for victory. The Coalition had no idea what that price would be. The Battle of Proxima Centauri began at 0347 ship time on a Tuesday that would be remembered as the day galactic warfare died. Commander Roth watched the opening moves from his retirement home, his tablet displaying real-time tactical data that his old intelligence contacts were somehow still sharing with him. Around him, other residents held their breath as 5,000 alien ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of humanity's oldest colony system. General Drayak's battle plan was a masterpiece of conventional military doctrine. His Saurian dreadnoughts formed the center of the formation, their overlapping shields creating an impenetrable wall of energy. Hive bioships swarmed around the heavy units like living clouds, ready to overwhelm any human defenders through sheer numbers. Luminal energy projectors took positions at maximum range, prepared to deliver precise destruction with weapons that could vaporize entire fleets. It was beautiful, elegant, and completely useless against an enemy that didn't follow galactic rules of warfare. "Look at them," Colonel Barnes whispered, pointing at the tactical display. "Perfect formation, perfect discipline. They're advancing like they're on parade." The human defenders of Proxima Centauri were nowhere to be seen. No formation of ships rose to meet the invaders. No defensive positions were visible on the system's planets or orbital habitats. According to every scanner the Coalition possessed, the system appeared virtually undefended. General Drayak broadcast his surrender demand on all frequencies, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had conquered 17 star systems. "Human forces will cease resistance immediately. Civilian populations will prepare for relocation to designated safe zones. You have 1 hour to comply." The response came from Admiral Chen herself, her voice transmitted from somewhere deep in the system. "General Drayak, welcome to Proxima Centauri. We've prepared something special for you." What happened next lasted 6 hours and redefined the concept of warfare for every species in the galaxy. The first surprise came when the Coalition fleet reached the system's outer asteroid belt. What their scanners had registered as normal space debris suddenly came alive with activity. Thousands of objects that had been drifting like dead rocks lit their engines and revealed themselves as camouflaged weapon platforms. Mining platforms that had been disguised as asteroids opened fire with kinetic accelerators, launching streams of projectiles at relativistic speeds. "Impossible," Dr. Kim breathed, watching the tactical display as Coalition ships began exploding. They turned the entire asteroid belt into a weapon. But that was just the beginning. As Drayak's forces pushed deeper into the system, they discovered that the humans had weaponized everything. Communication satellites became surveillance networks that tracked every Coalition movement. Cargo containers drifting in space revealed themselves as guided missiles when Coalition ships came within range. Even escape pods launched from damaged human vessels carried electromagnetic pulse warheads designed to cripple alien electronics. The Coalition's careful formations began to fall apart as human fighters emerged from hiding places that shouldn't have existed. They rose from behind planetary rings, dropped out of gas-giant atmospheres, and appeared from within nebula clouds that the Coalition scanners had dismissed as empty space. Each attack came from an unexpected angle, using the three-dimensional nature of space combat in ways that confused aliens who had evolved their military doctrine on planetary surfaces. "They're not fighting fair," Barnes muttered, but Roth could hear admiration in his voice despite the complaint. Fair had nothing to do with it. The humans were fighting for survival, and survival had no rules. Roth watched as Admiral Chen's forces demonstrated tactics that would have been considered war crimes in galactic conflicts. Civilian merchant ships revealed hidden weapon bays and rammed into Coalition vessels, their crews accepting certain death to damage the enemy. Communication networks were hacked and used to feed false information to Coalition commanders. Most shocking of all, human forces targeted alien supply ships and support vessels, crippling the Coalition's ability to sustain their assault. General Drayak tried to adapt, ordering his forces to spread out and avoid the concentrated firepower. That was devastating his formations. But the humans adapted faster. Weapon platforms that had been firing kinetic projectiles suddenly switched to electronic warfare, jamming Coalition communications and sensor networks. Fighter squadrons that had been attacking from one direction vanished and reappeared somewhere else entirely, using the system's complex gravitational environment to mask their movements. The Hive tried to overwhelm human defenses through sheer numbers, launching massive swarms of bioships at human positions. But the humans had studied captured Hive technology and understood how their collective consciousness worked. Electronic warfare specialists broadcast signals that interfered with Hive communications, causing entire swarms to lose coordination and collide with each other. The Luminals attempted to use their superior weapons technology to destroy human positions from maximum range, but their energy weapons, designed to penetrate conventional shields, were useless against human defenses that relied on kinetic barriers, electromagnetic fields, and simple physical obstacles. Human defenders hid behind asteroids, inside planetary atmospheres, and within the complex electromagnetic environments around gas giants, places where luminal weapons lost accuracy and effectiveness. It's like they studied every weakness in Coalition doctrine, Dr. Kim observed, her voice filled with horrified fascination. That was exactly what they had done, Roth realized. For months, human intelligence services had analyzed every aspect of Coalition military capabilities. They had identified the alien strengths and, more importantly, their assumptions about how warfare should be conducted. Then they had systematically designed a defense that violated every one of those assumptions. The turning point came when General Drayak ordered a direct assault on Proxima Centauri's main colony world. His remaining dreadnoughts, still more than 3,000 ships, formed up for a planetary bombardment that would force human surrender through overwhelming firepower. Admiral Chen's response was something that would haunt Coalition survivors for the rest of their lives. Instead of trying to stop the bombardment, she let it begin. Then, as Coalition ships focused their attention on the planet below, human forces struck from every direction simultaneously. The assault had been a trap, designed to concentrate the Coalition fleet in a position where they couldn't maneuver effectively. Fusion mines that had been disguised as space debris detonated throughout the Coalition formation. Kinetic kill vehicles, launched from hidden positions throughout the system, converged on the alien fleet from dozens of angles. Most devastating of all, the humans revealed weapon systems that they had reverse-engineered from captured Coalition technology, hybrid devices that combined human innovation with alien science to create weapons the Coalition had never imagined. When the battle ended, General Drayak retreated with less than 1,200 ships from his original force of 5,000. The Coalition had suffered the worst military defeat in recorded galactic history, and the humans had achieved it using improvised weapons, converted civilian equipment, and tactics that violated every accepted principle of civilized warfare. In the retirement home common room, stunned silence gave way to celebrations. But Roth didn't celebrate. He watched the news reports of coalition survivors describing weapons that appeared from nowhere, defenses that shouldn't have existed, and human forces that fought with a cold efficiency that terrified species accustomed to honorable combat. "They're calling it the Proxima Miracle," Barnes said, his voice filled with pride. "Our boys showed those aliens what humans can do when we put our minds to it." Miracle had nothing to do with it, Roth thought. The humans had won through careful planning, ruthless execution, and the willingness to use any tactic that might keep their children alive. They had fought not like galactic citizens bound by rules and traditions, but like the apex predators they had always been. His tablet chimed with intelligence reports from across human space. The victory at Proxima Centauri was just the beginning. Human forces were already analyzing captured coalition technology, incorporating alien innovations into their own weapon systems. More importantly, they were preparing for the next attack with the cold certainty that their enemies would return. Roth began typing his observations, documenting the day that humanity announced its true nature to the galaxy. The coalition would try again, he was certain. They would bring more ships, better weapons, and harder tactics. It wouldn't matter. They still didn't understand what they were fighting against. They thought they were facing another galactic species that could be defeated through superior force. Instead, they had encountered something that had never existed in their universe. A species that treated war not as a test of honor or strength, but as a problem to be solved by any means necessary. The galaxy was about to learn what that meant. The armistice request arrived 6 months after the Battle of Proxima Centauri, transmitted on emergency diplomatic channels that hadn't been used since the founding of the Galactic Confederation. Commander Roth read the decoded message on his tablet, while around him, the retirement home buzzed with news reports of humanity's final victory in what historians were already calling the shortest galactic war in recorded history. The formal diplomatic language couldn't hide the reality of what had happened. 3 coalition offensives had been launched against human space. Each had been larger than the last. Each had ended in catastrophic defeat for forces that had once seemed invincible. "Listen to this," Colonel Barnes said, reading from his own tablet. "The Saurian Empire is requesting a cessation of hostilities pending formal recognition of human territorial claims. They're not even pretending they can win anymore." The news displays around the common room showed images that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Saurian battle fleets in full retreat, their perfect formations shattered by human weapons that shouldn't have existed. Hive bioships floating dead in space, their collective consciousness disrupted by electronic warfare techniques that the aliens still didn't fully understand. Luminal energy projectors reduced to scrap metal by kinetic weapons that moved too fast for their targeting systems to track. But it wasn't just the military defeats that had broken the coalition's will to fight. It was the human approach to warfare itself. Dr. Kim was watching an interview with a coalition survivor, a Saurian commander whose scales had turned gray with what humans would recognize as post-traumatic stress. "They don't fight like civilized beings," the alien was saying through its translation device. "They attack supply lines, command centers, civilian infrastructure. They show no honor, no mercy, no respect for the traditions that govern proper warfare. How do you fight an enemy that has no rules?" Roth almost felt sorry for the creature. The coalition had spent thousands of years developing military doctrines based on limited warfare between professional armies. They fought to achieve political objectives, not to destroy their enemies utterly. The concept of total war, of treating conflict as an existential struggle that required any means necessary, was alien to their experience. It wasn't alien to humans. Humanity had learned to fight total wars against itself long before they reached the stars. Every human military commander understood concepts that no galactic species had ever needed to develop: strategic bombing, economic warfare, psychological operations, and the mobilization of entire populations for military purposes. "Look at this intelligence report," Barnes said, showing his tablet to anyone who would listen. "The humans didn't just win battles, they disrupted entire star systems, cut supply lines, turned coalition species against each other through propaganda, campaigns. They fought the kind of war the aliens had never imagined." The display switched to footage from the Second Battle of Wolf 359, where Admiral Torres had used captured Hive bioships to attack Saurian positions, making each coalition species think the others had betrayed them. Then came scenes from the defense of Tau Ceti, where human forces had used luminal energy weapons reverse-engineered from captured technology to destroy a coalition fleet that thought itself safely out of range. Most disturbing of all were the reports from the coalition's home systems. Human special forces had somehow penetrated deep into alien territory, conducting sabotage operations that crippled military production and destroyed strategic infrastructure. They moved through alien space like ghosts, striking targets that should have been impossible to reach. "How did they do it?" Dr. Kim asked, genuine wonder in her voice. "6 months ago, we barely had a space navy. Now we're dictating terms to species that have been conquering the galaxy for millennia." Roth knew the answer, though he doubted anyone would want to hear it. Humans had won through the systematic application of principles that the coalition couldn't understand. While alien species treated war as an extension of politics, humans treated it as applied problem-solving. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy was evaluated on a single criterion: did it help humans survive? The result had been a form of warfare that terrified civilized galactic society. Human forces didn't just defeat coalition fleets. They studied them, reverse-engineered their technology, and incorporated alien innovations into hybrid weapon systems that the original designers had never imagined. When the luminals deployed energy shields that could stop any known weapon, humans responded by building kinetic kill vehicles that moved too fast for the shields to track. When the Hive coordinated their bioships through quantum communication networks, humans developed electronic warfare systems that could disrupt quantum entanglement itself. "They're learning from everything," Barnes observed, reading another intelligence report. "Every battle, every captured ship, every piece of alien technology. It's like they're evolving in real time." That was exactly what they were doing, Roth realized. Human military doctrine was being rewritten daily based on battlefield experience, unlike the coalition species which relied on traditions refined. Over centuries, humans adapted their tactics as quickly as they could analyze new information. They had no sacred battle formations to preserve, no honorable combat traditions to maintain. They simply used whatever worked. The news switched to coverage of the armistice negotiations. The terms were simple and devastating for the coalition. Human territorial claims would be recognized in full. Humanity would receive immediate membership in the Galactic Confederation, not as junior partners, but as equals. Most humiliating of all, the coalition would provide technological assistance to help humans integrate their hybrid weapon systems with galactic technology standards. "They're giving us everything we asked for," Dr. Kim said in amazement. "Full membership, territorial recognition, technology transfers. It's like they're afraid of us." They were afraid, Roth knew. The coalition had encountered something that didn't exist anywhere else in the galaxy, a species that had evolved warfare as a survival skill rather than a political tool. For thousands of years, galactic conflicts had been limited affairs between professional military forces. The idea of mobilizing entire civilizations for war, of treating every resource and every citizen as part of the war machine, was so alien to their experience that they had no defense against it. The display showed Admiral Chen arriving at the negotiation station, her small escort fleet dwarfed by the massive coalition delegation ships. But size didn't matter anymore. Everyone in the galaxy knew that those coalition ships represented military forces that had already been defeated. The humans had proven that superior numbers and technology meant nothing against an enemy willing to fight without rules. "Look at her," Barnes said with obvious pride. 6 months ago, she was just another fleet commander. Now she's negotiating as an equal with species that have been around for millions of years. Admiral Chen's first statement to the galactic media was brief and to the point. Humanity seeks peaceful coexistence with all galactic species. We hope that recent misunderstandings can be resolved through diplomatic means rather than military action. The diplomatic language was perfect, but Roth could read the subtext that every coalition leader would understand. Humanity was offering peace, but only on their own terms. The alternative was the continuation of a war that the aliens could not win. "Misunderstandings," Dr. Kim repeated with a bitter laugh. "She's calling the complete destruction of 3 coalition fleets a misunderstanding." The negotiations lasted 3 days and resulted in the Treaty of New Geneva, an agreement that fundamentally altered the balance of power in galactic civilization. Humanity received everything they had demanded, plus concessions that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Human companies would have access to galactic markets. Human colonists could settle anywhere they chose. Most importantly, human military forces would be recognized as legitimate peacekeeping units with the right to intervene in galactic conflicts. The retired veterans in the common room celebrated with champagne that Nurse Katie had somehow procured for the occasion. They toasted humanity's victory, their children's future, and the peace that would allow human civilization to flourish among the stars. Roth didn't celebrate. He sat in his chair, typing observations into his tablet, documenting the day that changed galactic civilization forever. The other species thought they had made peace with humanity. They thought the war was over and normal diplomatic relations could resume. They were wrong. The war was over, but nothing would ever be normal again. Humanity had revealed its true nature to the galaxy, and that revelation could never be undone. Every species in the Confederation now knew that humans were different, that they fought wars with a cold efficiency that civilized beings couldn't match. The news reports spoke of humanity's bright future among the stars, of the technological marvels they would build, of the contributions they would make to galactic society. But Roth knew the real truth. Humanity had just announced itself as the apex predator in a galaxy full of sheep. The other species would adapt, of course. They would study human tactics, try to understand human psychology, and develop countermeasures against human unpredictability. But it wouldn't matter. They would always be playing catch-up against a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war against opponents who knew all their tricks. As the celebrations continued around him, Roth finished his final entry in the journal he had been keeping since first contact. His last words captured the reality that the galaxy was still struggling to understand. Today, the Galactic Confederation learned that humans are not another species seeking their place among the stars. We are the species that the stars have been waiting for. We did not conquer through superior technology or greater numbers. We conquered through the simple understanding that in a universe full of predators, the most dangerous creature is often the one that looks most vulnerable. He closed the tablet and settled back in his chair, watching the news reports of humanity's triumphant entry into galactic civilization. Around him, former soldiers laughed and celebrated, enjoying what they believed was the dawn of a peaceful future. Roth knew better. Peace was just another form of war, and humans had just proven they were very good at war. The galaxy would learn to live with that knowledge, or it would learn why resistance was futile. Either way, humanity would endure and prosper among the stars, just as they had endured and prospered on every battlefield they had ever entered. The universe belonged to whoever was willing to fight for it. Today, That was humanity.